We're hosting now a very exciting new initiative of the OECD. We have with us Romina Boarini, who is the acting director of the OECD's Centre. That's a long name, so hopefully I get it right, but each word is very important. So it's well-being. It's Romina, why don't you help me? You know what? That would be more accurate.
Of course. So it's well-being, inclusion, sustainability, equal opportunity, and together it reads WISE.
WISE is definitely easier, but each word, as I said, is really important. Also with us is Ziga Zarnic, who is the head of the measurement unit. Hello, Ziga. So as I've said, we're really sort of excited about this new center and actually the decision behind it to put so much effort into those important areas that are covered within the center's name. So Romina, maybe sort of let's kick off with how come, especially now, and what do you hope to achieve and lead the center towards?
Well, thank you so much, Momo, for this great introduction. WISE was established last summer, and the main mission is to promote the well-being of all and of everybody. And the reasons why the OECD decided to create the center is really very much related to the mission of the organization, but more specifically to the fact that over the last decade, the OECD very much invested on those issues that indeed now are regrouped under the responsibilities of the WISE Centre. So for more than a decade, we really look into the issues how to better measure and understand people's well-being, but also how to connect it to sustainability. We also look very much at the issues of inequalities and how we should, all countries and all economies look and understand these issues of inequalities. What are the impacts for societies? And the decision was taken, obviously, at a very critical moment in time where, most of the countries in the OECD, but obviously in all countries of the world, have been impacted by the COVID crisis. And what we're seeing at the OECD is that the COVID crisis is actually a well-being crisis. And so the center is really happening at the moment where we have this crucial opportunity to really catalyze all the important work that the OECD has done over the last few years, but actually put it together with all the stakeholders we have been working with to create a new normal. And so we do want to reset, the economy. We do want to reset, the economic and business models. And we want to do it in a way that is really sustainable and really puts everybody and everybody's well-being at the very core of policy decisions and business decisions.
And you've mentioned business, and that's not by chance, because one of the main pillars of the initiative of the center is an initiative that was formed with businesses on inclusive growth. We have it featured on the VOD channel as well, and we'll come back to businesses, I think, shortly. But first, what's ahead for 2021? The world in COVID, hopefully post-COVID, inequality, as you've said, is a major area. So what could we expect for 2021 in terms of your work?
So there are going to be, a number of activities that we're working on. And of course, many of them are framed or deeply connected to the COVID crisis. So the first one is really looking at what we call the well-being inputs that the crisis had. And so we're doing a scan that really systematically tries to understand, how people's lives have changed, in the context of COVID, but also, what have been the source of resilience that different people and different communities have been able to mobilize. And so this well-being scan, really comes with a strong sort of objective to try to inform sort of the policy response, but also the response of other actors, including businesses. And so it's really about understanding how some fundamental dimensions of well-being have been affected. Everybody, of course, have heard about I mean, we all know about the big death toll that came about with COVID, and of course, a large number of lives being lost, but an even large number of lives being affected in terms of physical health, but also in terms of mental health. And so one of the specific focuses in our work is really looking at, what are the inputs on people's life in terms of to what extent, for instance, social connection and social connectedness have been impaired by the COVID crisis. So we're looking at this in a very holistic manner. We have a well-being framework at the OECD that is multidimensional, is really looking at many dimensions of people's well-being, but also what drives, the resources that generate well-being over time. And so at the end of this big exercise, the idea is really to come up with strong core for actions for governments, but also for business leaders. Another piece of work we're working on connects to the issues of inequality, as I just mentioned. And so the OECD did quite a lot, to document the long-term sort of trends in terms of increase of income inequalities, but also wealth inequalities, and we'll look a lot as well at issues of social mobility. So it's not just how large is inequality today, but to what extent this is actually impacting the chances of future generation. And one of the main findings of our work is really that the large inequalities, the larger is the more unequal is a country, and the less mobile is going to be the people and the children that live in that country. And so now we are actually adding another layer to that analysis, and this is where we're going to focus our efforts in 2021, which is looking at perceptions of inequality and social and subjective factors of inequality, so understand really how people perceive inequalities and what that means in terms of people expectations for solutions that need to be taken to address and tackle inequalities. So, for instance, what are the risks that are perceived by different population groups, and how the governments and how other actors can actually step in, to cover for some risks, but also, to protect and mitigate some risks. And so, this additional piece around perceptions of inequality is going to really give us a very, very concrete understanding of what we call it, the social contracts. The social contract is changing. Societies have faced a number of challenges. In a way, COVID is only the last one, but, we are all undergoing deep structural changes, societal transformations, digital, climate change, aging. These are only examples about the fact that obviously a lot is changing, a lot is moving here. And of course, people comes with concerns and fears, but also comes with expectations and demands in terms of what the governments and what businesses should actually do to fix some of those issues and to ensure that those changes actually contribute to the well-being of all. And finally, if I can just mention the work that we are doing in collaboration with businesses, and indeed, for the moment we're supporting a big coalition, but we're working with a number of other actors out there. Of course, BSR is one of our stakeholders, and we are collaborating really around a better definition of what stakeholder capitalism means. Not only sort of what are the principles of it, but very importantly, the work that we're doing around the metrics. And so we try to go very, very, concrete there, and connecting that not only with the perspective of companies. Of course, it's about first understanding how the businesses can have an input on people's life, and, how they can contribute to societal well-being. This is, I would say, the starting point for WISE. But this is also how, for instance, that understanding of the business contributions, how that, for instance, can be used to inform ESG type of metrics, and so can actually be used by the financial markets themselves. So it's not just about the corporate usage. Of course, that is important, and this is something we are focusing on. But more broadly, the question is really how we make sure that the entire, I would say, market structure and market economy can better reflect the inputs that businesses are having on people's lives.
So that sounds exactly what we need now. What the world needs, what Israel needs, as societies were severely impacted. I think the first wave, we all dealt with, the emergency response, but I think we gradually more and more feel and understand that there's a huge social impact here on well-being, as you mentioned, on inequality that seems to be affected, maybe on the rise. We know that those who were weak before were hit harder. So all of that is greatly in need. You've mentioned the measurement, which is highly important. We know that there's quite a lot of measurement tools on the E side of the ESG, the environment. It's good news that there's work on the S side, on the social aspect. Maybe we'll bring Ziga into the conversation for that, as I understand that he's working on the measurements, and any initial thoughts on what and how businesses could sort of use the measurements tools that you're working on.
Yes. Should I offer some initial thoughts, and I'll have Ziga for elaborating on
Absolutely.
that. So I think just one important point to make is that if you look at what businesses have accomplished on this, is huge. And we at the OECD work a lot with governments, and governments themselves made a lot of progress in terms of measuring people's well-being and inputs or policies on people's well-being. And yet, if you compare that, that progress with the one that has been made by companies themselves, sometimes you feel, wow, companies have been really, really at the cutting edge of this. And this is a great, I think, dynamics, and something, for instance, that we see very much typically on SDGs. This is the 2030 agenda, which is so important, one for, the global community. And this is an area where companies did a lot. The challenge we see is the challenge of fragmentation, the challenge of diversity of those methodologies, which come with very unequal, quality, and therefore can't be really used, in any systematic and structured way by investors. And so I think indeed, Momo, what you were saying about, the need to concentrate on the S, but the way we need to articulate this should, from the very beginning, take into account the fact that any type of measurement framework needs to be investable. This needs to be a very practical tool that investors, can use to frame, and inform their decision. So yes, obviously starts with companies, because that type of work on S needs to be done in consultation with companies. We're going, to discuss with Ziga exactly how we're doing this. But I think, the end game of this is really how the markets can actually make use of that very important information.
Sounds good. And I completely agree about the potential impact of business here. We see it really even in the immediate sort of connection between employers and employees. Ziga, what would you sort of add to that?
Well, thank you very much, Romina and Momo. So really maybe just three very high-level observations, but nevertheless I would like to provide some details. So first one is really the focus on what's being measured, so that matters to people and business, but also in terms of whether we're really capturing the inputs, the outputs into the production process, or we are really building knowledge about what the impact of business actions is on people, on the environment, because nevertheless, businesses, they do provide job opportunities, they do provide consumption goods, they use natural resources, they use infrastructure and so forth. So we need to capture for these aspects very well. And this is the challenge, because what we've seen so far is there's been a lot of progress done by companies to pair the key financial indicators with information that provides a lot of input and output to what businesses are doing, but less on the impact of their actions. Then the second point really is about what do we do around, how we go around making it cost efficient, because you mentioned that there are many frameworks out there. So we are really at the point that we do not want to add another level of complexity if we are to achieve certain convergence to the approach. So in that sense, what we really need is a structure rather than developing another new framework, another new set of indicators, be it 20, 30, 40, 50. We actually need to narrow it down. And this is something that we're doing with our initiatives, going beyond GDP, with a well-being framework, something that is really well captured in the work with the governments, in our publications like Better Life Initiative, House Life publication, but we haven't done that much, as a society, on the business side. And the third part that I think is the most challenging is really actually how do we think about the trade-offs, basically the connections. What made it sort of easier, or let's say that we've seen a lot of progress on the environmental side of the puzzle is actually that we were able to go behind the return risk equation. But here it's really not that much about risk. Yes, there are social risks because of COVID, but it's really, if you're about impact measurement, it's about how do we track progress to see if companies are making positive impact on the society. So actually the side of equation or the approach to the problem is slightly different. And going forward, this really implies that what we are thinking in groups like Business for Inclusive Growth Coalition, that we are really trying to build impact pathways to understand the process of going from inputs coming into the production process, coming into companies, towards what is the impact of using such impact to generate outputs. So, without further ado, let me maybe leave it here, but just to emphasize, it's not a standalone effort. We are working together with UNDP, IBC, Inclusive Capitalism, SASP, and other, including actually also the Impact Management Project and so forth, to really come towards something that can resonate well with businesses as a really useful metrics.
Yes, I think the world here is usefulness. It sounds as if businesses are looking for that. The measurement is predominantly, I think, first and foremost, kind of a management system for businesses. That's how we see the things in Israel. And then, as you both mentioned, it's also a way to engage with external stakeholders and obviously with investors who had a very substantial role in promoting the E that we have seen. I also completely aligned with you on the keep it simple. As the world is becoming much more complex, I think the measurement tools that we develop and the management system that we develop need in a way to help make things simpler than they are. We would definitely like to keep in touch here and bring the Israeli business community on board. I think our relationship has started when we sent you the book that we've published on business and inclusive growth last year. The world has completely changed. Romina, to sort of sum up and say goodbye, businesses, if we understand, are absolutely invited and actually are part of this whole initiative at the core, not just as kind of a sector that will be followed up later, right?
Absolutely. So, every time we're talking about WISE, why people are asking us, so why did you call it WISE? And this is, to express the fact that this is not a nice to have, this is a must have. And I think it's very interesting that, as I said, businesses are the first ones that kind of understood that and really are working on those topics in a very, very interesting way, in a way that can inspire governments. And so in WISE, we are giving special attention to that. We are collaborating in all what we do with businesses. They can provide, a very, very interesting perspectives on topics that are relevant for governments. And so really the ambition that we have, and we are, concretely sort of putting it in place through concrete activities, is to have policymakers and businesses working together. So it's really about building the bridges that we need to have convergence, towards better well-being for all in this planet.
Excellent. So this will definitely gives us something to work on for 2021. I think with a focus on an issue that, as I've mentioned, is very high on the agenda of the Israeli business community and at large. Romina, Ziga, thank you very much for being with us here today. And good luck to us all.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you so much. And we look forward to working with you and all the Israel business community in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.